Okay, welcome to yet another breakout session of 2023 ILOC, where we are focusing on productive partnerships. My name is Mary Ann Morey, and I am a district consultant with the State Library. I represent Central District, and with me is Angela Forret, who is our just super person who works a lot with our continuing education and also with reference at the State Library, at the physical State Library. So I'm thankful to have her doing tech today. This session is all about outreach projects with library and social work. So it's a very timely topic for us. And I have two presenters here, both of whom are from the Des Moines Public Library. Elizabeth Hoover de Galvez is the Adult Services Librarian at Des Moines Public. And she's also a trustee and steward with the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, which I just think is so unique and just amazing. And we also have Alicia Mangin, who is a senior librarian at the Des Moines Public Library and currently supervises Southside Library, one of the branch locations of the Des Moines system. And your special interests include unhoused populations and addressing food insecurity. So all very timely topics and interests for our public libraries. And I am going to hand it over to the two of you to go ahead and do your presentation. We will have time at the end for some Q&A, so please just put your questions in the chat and I will keep track of those.
Thank you, everyone who has already voted in our survey or shared your experiences in our poll. It looks like most of the people out of the 20 or so who have responded, most say that they have periodically run into a patron in crisis. We have another question here that we're going to look at the answers to that people have shared. These are answers to the question, what has your library done to try and address issues with patrons who are experiencing a crisis? And I'll give everybody a few minutes just to look at some of those answers.
I see that one that says calm spaces and fresh coffee. That's a pretty simple thing to do, right?
Yeah, we've been offering coffee lately. It seems to make, when it's really cold out, it seems to make people really appreciative and get us set off on the right foot. Some library offers supply kits, Ryan Dowd training. We have the Ryan Dowd training as well, and that has been really helpful in my experience. Resources, books, websites, county connections, online computer access, tried to contact local assistance, a food pantry. So lots of really great answers here as well. So thank you for participating. If you haven't yet, you can still participate by going to menti.com and clicking that code 73350 or looking at the link in the chat. But we're going to go ahead and go on to our formal part of our presentation here.
Okay, so hi, I'm Alicia Mangin, and welcome to our presentation about the Outreach Project, a library social work partnership. We are really excited to share this incredible partnership between the Des Moines Public Library and various community organizations that assist patrons with their psychosocial needs, like finding housing, getting an identification, or accessing public benefits. As Mary Ann mentioned, I'm a senior librarian at the Des Moines Public Library. I supervise the Southside Library. I've worked at DMPL for about 17 years, and I worked at the Central Library from 2015 to 2022. 6 of those years, I worked as a librarian, and then the last year as a manager. As a librarian, I was deeply impacted by the patrons that I met every day. They were experiencing life difficulties like filling out Social Security paperwork or securing housing. And I was also able to see the strain that it placed on frontline staff. When I moved into management, I continued to experience these frustrations in addition to handling regular incidents and problems. My time at Central Library, focusing on providing services to our most vulnerable patrons, really changed me professionally and personally. And that's one reason that I'm so proud to be part of this program, the Outreach Project.
And as Marianne mentioned, I'm Elizabeth Hoover de Galvez. I've been at the Des Moines Public Library for just 3.5 years. And prior to coming to the Des Moines Public Library, I actually worked at a small liberal arts college for 5 years. And in all of that time, I can only remember encountering a member of the public in crisis on one occasion. And on that day, a student came in to share with me that there was a man who was behaving erratically. And I went and talked to him, and I had just actually read a bit of Ryan Dowd's book about how to de-escalate situations. And he was definitely in a difficult situation. I went and talked to him, and I used Ryan Dowd's strategies for de-escalation. And I was so impressed how quickly they put him at ease. But I found out he didn't have a place to stay that night. So that was the first time I'd really experienced a patron in crisis at that public or at that private college. So since coming to the Des Moines Public Library, though, I encounter members of the public in crisis pretty much every day. They don't always ask for help, so or need assistance immediately. But I sometimes do offer direct assistance to someone experiencing a crisis. Some examples from the last year of cases that I've handled included a family with young children who I had a suspicion that they had just been evicted. They brought in a full suitcase of items and stayed all day in the library while they tried to research services. I've had job applicants who've come in and really needed an extensive assistance with their resume or with their application or with the application process in general. I've worked with a woman who had been assaulted and needed to get into a domestic violence shelter, a man who had been mugged, a man who went into cardiac arrest while I was in charge or while I was at the reference desk, a woman who had her phone stolen and needed help requesting a new one, a man who was experiencing incontinence, and a man who had overdosed. So a lot of different situations that were really beyond the scope of what you can expect a librarian to necessarily have training or knowledge about how to handle a lot of these. And so that's what this project is about, and what our presentation is about today is what kinds of support we can provide to the patrons in crisis who come into the library, and also for those frontline staff who are, facing these situations that are really outside of the scope of what they've been trained to handle in the past.
So first, we're going to share a video that was produced by the City of Des Moines in the fall of 2021. So just after we started the outreach project, helping us to introduce and promote it in the community. And we've been really fortunate because city leaders and key departments have been really supportive of our partnerships and the outreach project mission.
And I'm going to play this. If you can't hear it, please let me know and I will change the settings here. No? Okay. Let me.
I know, because it has really jazzy music, so I don't hear the jazzy music.
Unfortunately, I didn't hit the button when I started sharing. I'm sorry about that. Okay.
The Outreach Project is a new service that we're offering here at Central Library that will connect library patrons and really anyone in the community with organizations that can help them sort of navigate any community services. Here at Central, we had talked for a long time about having social workers in the building to help patrons who come in and might need a little bit more help than we can provide. And so we contacted CIS, Hope Ministries, and Primary Healthcare, and we all discussed what we could do together.
This whole idea of the project, kind of happened after, with COVID, right? And we had to get more creative as far as where we were engaging people at to rediscover, hey, where are you staying at now? Because we've lost contact. Fast forward then to the last couple of months, it has just kind of continued to grow and grow and grow into, something else at this point, which is which has been pretty exciting.
When we come together at the library on these times, it's 4 different organizations that are able to work together to really, explore avenues. Hey, can they get in at CISS? Okay, that's not an option. Maybe we can get them in up here at the Bethel. Does it need substance abuse or mental health services? Then we're all able to really collaborate, which is really exciting to me, because that way, it's not just one agency, it's 4 trying to come up with the best outcomes for people.
The library is such a central, key location in not just this community, but every community. There's a lot of people that come in and out of the door, and that's a safe spot for people. I'm able to go and engage with, those people that everybody else has a hard time trying to engage with, right? And I'm able to go and just, hey, how's it going?
One of the problems out there is awareness. A lot of people don't know that services and programs exist that can help them. So when I'm able to connect that dot with someone and kind of have like that, oh, aha, to where they can just exhale like, oh, it's taken care of. That's where I get my enjoyment.
I think anything that connects people with more information is a good thing. And that's part of the library's mission, to connect people with information and correct information. And so anytime we can do that, I think it makes the community healthier and stronger as a whole.
Okay, so before we get into the outreach project, I would like to give a little background about how we reached that point of deciding to do that type of partnership. Yep, there we go. So I just want to provide a brief overview of our library staffing structure and patron demographics. The Des Moines Public Library consists of 6 locations, with Central Library as the main library in downtown Des Moines. Central Library serves a broad population from families and seniors to the unhoused and underserved. DMPL staffing is comprised of managers, librarians and library assistants, clerical staff, and library aides. And Central Library maintains the largest staff, covering 6 service points from a pickup window to telephone reference. And I just wanted to share some recent data from the US Census and HUD's point in time count that shows 15% of households in the Des Moines community are below the poverty level, and approximately 576 people are experiencing some level of homelessness, either sheltered or unsheltered. So it's really important to discuss how this was impacting our staff. For those working in the Des Moines Public Library system, frontline staff are the first to see patrons facing these life difficulties. And as many of you know, librarians, we're compassionate people. We want to help. But we often struggle with how best to assist people who need help. So as a result, we saw some things happening to staff. We saw increased incidents. Working with vulnerable populations, it tends to result in occasional unwanted behaviors like intoxication or aggressiveness. We were seeing an increase in traumatic events. So sometimes these incidents would result in a traumatic event or an experience by staff. And this could range from a single occurrence that was a big traumatic event to multiple different forms of trauma that would accumulate over time. And then, of course, there's compassion fatigue. Like I said, library staff, we're naturally caring people. We want to help. So when dealing with vulnerable populations every day, staff can start to experience compassion fatigue and feel helpless or maybe less empathetic. So in response to this, and in response to the staff struggling, we formed a team called the Social Services Team. And we really wanted to study how the library was changing and what our system could do to be more proactive in the community. So the Social Services Team, this is where we started, the very beginnings of the outreach project. And it started in November of 2017, which seems like ages ago. But we started it at the Central Library, and we had 2 managers, 2 librarians, and 1 clerk, because we felt it was really important to make sure that all levels of staff were included in this initiative, to ensure all viewpoints and experiences were being considered. First, we started by compiling information. We looked at articles, websites related to public libraries and social services, and we also used this time to really look at DMPL's offerings and our services and what we're already doing to meet some of those needs. And so over the first year, we developed some objectives that we felt were very important. We wanted to discuss how to support staff and make them feel safe. We wanted to analyze our customer behavior policy to highlight things that maybe were hindering a person's use or enjoyment of the library. We started to compile community resources based on commonly requested information by patrons. We also took a look at our incident reports to better understand what incidents lead to banning and how often a police presence is needed. And then we did make some community organization visits. We went out to some of the local shelters, met with the staff there, and we also attended some meetings like the Iowa Council on Homelessness. We reached out to a number of library systems across the country, asking about their social worker and service programs. And then we also recognized the need to explore staff training that would feature de-escalation techniques and mental health strategies. So as a result of our first year, because we were very, very motivated, we came up with 2 great guides for our staff and patrons. On the left, you'll see our street card, and on the right, our community resources page on our library website. So during the development phase, we used a spreadsheet to compile information about local organizations, sorted them by category, and then restricted those to Des Moines area, except for hotlines. And we tried to make sure that everything we were putting on the resource lists were free or low cost, and that they were open to everyone. Finally, before we created the guides, we did make sure and reach out to all the organizations and make sure that all their contact information was up to date. So that's always really important. So the next thing the social services team did, with assistance from our marketing team, because we were very fortunate to have one, is they helped us build a community resources database for the library website. And then they helped us create the street card, which is just a pocket directory of social service agencies. During the early stages of the social services team, during the research phase, I found a lot of libraries did have, some sort of physical handout with community resources on it. And I thought that was so clever. And I thought that definitely fell within the scope of what a public library can offer and do that wouldn't require much funding or staff time. And I am proud to say that we worked quickly and were able to get both of those resources out to the public and staff by November of 2018. So it took us a year. And then I did want to make a couple additional comments, because having worked with community resources, I realized there are challenges involved. One is keeping them up to date. Organizations close, they move, they change their phone numbers. So we do try to look at these at least once a year to make sure that everything is up to date and accurate, and whether we want to change any of the organizations listed. And then I also do want to point out that although we created these with the patron in mind, these have been incredibly helpful to the staff as well, because the staff can use that when a patron comes up to the desk, and they can use that resource, and it's right there, immediate. They know that it's, a reputable organization, and that they can direct that person to them. So it's been really helpful for patrons and staff.
And I wanted to mention that I came on board when I started in 2019 and joined the social services team when pretty much all of the work Alicia mentioned had already been completed. And what we were doing at that time on that team was maintaining these resources, as she mentioned, updating them, making sure they were accurate. And so that was my introduction to this team. Obviously, as Alicia mentioned, she had made contact and the team had made contact with many community resources when they were just verifying information. But Alicia was promoted into a senior librarian role and continued to develop partnerships with community agencies. Particularly, she was working with CISS, Central Iowa Shelter and Services, which is a shelter nearby. It's the largest shelter in Iowa, and it's just 3 blocks away from the Central Library. So she had been working with them once she was promoted into her senior librarian or manager role. And so the focus of the social services team was shifting a bit as Alicia continued working on that new project with CISS. So specifically, we wanted to build a live aspect of the street outreach card. We wanted to have people who were coming into the library and offering their services in the library. And the project that Alicia was working on with CISS was a grant request to try and fund a staff person to actually offer outreach in the library. Someone who would be supervised by CISS, but would come and do outreach in the library on a regular basis. That grant, we did not end up seeing that get funded, but they applied together. Alicia worked with CISS to apply, but they mentioned that another organization in town, Primary Healthcare, had gotten that grant to have a street outreach worker. So we knew that the door wasn't closed, that there was someone in town who maybe had the resources available. We really wanted to focus, though, on finding partners who were already providing the types of social and support services that we were seeing our patrons looking for. Meal sites, shelters, scheduling medical appointments, applying for an ID, or locating clothing, for example. And as part of the work that Alicia was doing with CISS, they were sending staff in. They were sending in a social work intern and one of their staff members and a social worker to kind of walk through the library and see, if people approach them for assistance. One thing here to point out is when we were building these partnerships, relationships were really important. So some of the relationships have stuck with us even as people have changed jobs. So that as there's a lot of turnover at a lot of the nonprofit organizations, and people will maybe work for one organization and then shift into a different organization, but that relationship that they have individually with us has been maintained, which is really wonderful to see. And it depends a lot on the staff member who's coming in to do outreach, their commitment and dedication to coming in. And then, of course, on having the institutional support. So that grant is key. The grant that CIS didn't get to provide the outreach worker, but Primary Healthcare did get. We knew that Primary Healthcare could be an important partner for us at that point, since they had that grant. And I was at the first breakout session this morning, and one of the presenters mentioned that the missing link to your amazing partnership could just be the person standing in front of you at the desk. And that definitely happened with us. And I'll tell you that story here of how we connected with Primary Healthcare in just a moment. First, I just wanted to show you where Central Iowa Shelter and Services is. As I mentioned, we had an existing relationship with them. Alicia had been working with them closely. They're just 3 blocks away from the library. They're a low barrier shelter providing services for adults. And Primary Healthcare is then just a couple of miles away. And they provide centralized intake for all Des Moines shelters and assist with housing placement, case management, referrals, and uncovering options for income streams. So when I started, I didn't know what centralized intake meant, but basically anyone who wants to get into a shelter needs to go and do a survey with a case manager or a social worker at primary health care and go through a list of questions to find out what their risk factors are. And then the case manager can then identify what services they may be eligible to receive. So they can't necessarily get into a shelter anywhere in town until they do that centralized intake, which is one of those keys when we're trying as librarians to like go through a list of shelters. The easy answer is just go to primary health care. It's not like you have to call every shelter. Your first step is really usually to go to primary health care. So the way we made contact with primary health care is that their street outreach worker, not long after we didn't get the grant to have a street outreach worker with CISS, their street outreach worker stopped by the front desk of the library when I happened to be sitting there. And he said, I'm interested in doing some outreach in the library. And I said, this is wonderful. Let me get your card. And we'd love to have you come to a meeting with some other partners that we're considering working with. So he just walked through the door. I still don't know how he came up with the idea at this moment that we were trying to find these partners, that he just found us. So that was really wonderful. I mentioned that those relationships persist even as people move to new organizations. So we connected with Hope Ministries because we'd been working with CISS, with the shelter, and their intern, who was a student getting his social work degree, actually graduated and was hired by Hope Ministries to be a street outreach worker. So that's how we connected with Hope Ministries, which is a shelter. It provides food, clothing, shelter, and life recovery support for men, women, and children. And again, it's just a couple of miles away from the Central Library. St. Vincent de Paul has become an important partner for us as well. And they have been consistently sending an outreach staff member to come and staff the outreach desk. And they're right up there near Hope Ministries. So she actually connected with the street outreach worker from primary health care and saw him as sort of a mentor to help her. And so that's how she got connected to us. And again, she started with House of Mercy and switched over to St. Vincent de Paul and continued the relationship with us once she moved. A couple of notes about St. Vincent de Paul are that they help break down barriers and help individuals achieve self-sufficiency by providing food, clothing, household, and personal items. And they have prison reentry services and a program that helps individuals who are unemployed gain employment. And so that's one of the programs that our street outreach worker from St. Vincent de Paul actually works with. Here are photos of those three core partners that we've really been working with. Rob Slomke was the street outreach worker from primary health care who just showed up one day. Holly Henderson is with St. Vincent de Paul now, and Kurt Covington was the intern with CISS, who then moved over to Hope Ministries as an outreach worker.
So here's a photo of our first official meeting on June 3rd, 2021. The DEI team, which was formerly the social services team, joined the street outreach staff from CIS, Primary Health Care, and Hope Ministries. And it was a really, really positive and exciting meeting. Everyone was ready to form this partnership and just start. So we were really brainstorming and trying to work out some logistics, and we discussed things like similar programs across the country and how we could possibly adapt them, how staff would know when they're in the building and who they are, what services they would offer, how we will advertise their services, and then what kind of ongoing support they would provide to our staff. Like I said, we only had 1 hour in the meeting, but we were all ready to start. So we made the decision to start some sort of partnership in the next month and just not delay offering these services to patrons.
Over the month after that meeting, we worked out all of the details via email with all of the partners. We debated names, and I think Rob was the one who actually kind of combined a couple of different names that Alicia had thrown out and came up with the name the Outreach Project. So I mean, we looked at many different programs around the country for how they described their programs, and wrote up some kind of descriptions of how we wanted to advertise this outreach. And one piece of feedback we got from the partners was that our target population may actually see the word social worker and have negative connotations with it. And so they encouraged us to not use the word social worker. So we decided to describe it as a way to connect with community advocates. We also wanted to make sure that people knew that this was really for anyone who needed assistance or connecting with any kind of support in the community. So we didn't want to say this is just for people experiencing homelessness. We really left it wide open, and that's what's so amazing about our partners is that they have just met people where they're at and tried to assist them with whatever they might be needing. So everything kind of came together. We had settled on the days and the times that they would come 2 days a week from 1 to 3, and we decided to go ahead and start in early July. So,
and here are photos from our early days. Our community advocates were stationed in the gateway at the Central Library near 2 main entrances. The library team used a library tablecloth that we use for outreach. Elizabeth created the sandwich board signage, and then we borrowed a brochure tower from another place in the library and filled it with information that we thought would be helpful to patrons, including the business cards of our new advocates. And we just called it good to go. We were ready to start. The first couple days were quiet. It was slow, but people were definitely curious. Patrons would enter the library and they'd stop and ask, what's the outreach project? And our community advocates, they were so excited to talk about it and let people know that they were there to help everyone. And the overall response from patrons was positive. And then we also noticed that many of our patrons were already familiar with the advocates that were doing the outreach project because they see them out in the community. And it didn't take long for them to know that they could count on them being at this location on Mondays and Fridays from 1 to 3. So that really helped too.
Yeah, having that time slot that was repeated every week, that was useful not only because the public could count on coming in and getting assistance, but it was also nice for staff to be able to refer anybody who came in looking for some assistance that maybe was beyond what we could help them with. They could always just say, well, here's a flyer about the outreach project. You might want to check it out on Monday or Friday. It was also really helpful having those times because when the word got out about the outreach project, many different organizations reached out to us and asked to get involved. And I mean, in general, we also just have organizations that reach out and ask to do something in the library. And this just gave us a place to slot them in where we had the times and the advertising done. And we could just say, yeah, you can try coming in and offering assistance during outreach hours. So we've seen a lot of different organizations come, stay for a while and move on. This is where I think that the importance of having that institutional support is really important. Having that funding to have a position that's specifically outreach. That's what's kept our core group going. But on this list, we also have IO Legal Aid that's been coming on Mondays to help set up appointments for people. And that's been a great service to add. We'll have Project Iowa starting with us soon to see about offering some additional job placement assistance. And two that were big surprises for us were Lifeline and Social Security. So Lifeline, or the Affordable Connectivity Program, and Social Security were both very popular. And the way they actually came and connected with us was through our current outreach, our core outreach staff. So they invited them to come and try doing outreach. During the pandemic, the Social Security office in Des Moines was closed. It was by appointment only, and you'd had to call a number and wait on hold for a while to get an appointment. So there was a lot of people in need of, getting benefit updates or Social Security cards that were looking for assistance. And when they came in, the very first day they came in to offer drop-in assistance, they served 37 people that day in the 2-hour period, and there was a long line for them. So that continued to be a very popular service up until the time they reopened their office and stopped coming to outreach. The other one, the Lifeline program, there's this big federal program to offer free phones or internet connection for people, or funding for people to get those services, but not a whole lot of like on the ground support to help people. So they can come in on Mondays and sign up for a phone, show their proof that they are eligible, and then walk away with a phone from the provider that comes in to the outreach project. So that's very, very popular. We get people all week long asking, are the phone people here? Are the phone people here? It's always just Monday at 1 to 3 p.m. So that has been a big surprise for us, how much need there was around those two different services.
Of course, with any major initiative, there are bound to be challenges. And during the first few months of the outreach project, we had several organizations reach out to us who were interested in participating. And, Elizabeth and I were still learning the ropes. So we were like, of course, everyone should join us. And since the program is located in Des Moines, we did choose to only invite partners located in Des Moines and not the surrounding cities. And then we noticed it was difficult for many social service agencies to maintain consistent staffing. So we had a few community advocates who would participate for a few days or weeks, but then never return. Elizabeth and I were really fortunate to speak with Beth Waller in May of 2022, and we spoke to her about the challenges of consistency. And she did note that this is a common difficulty in maintaining a social work partnership with the libraries due to organizational turnover and differing backgrounds. And that gave us some relief knowing that it's not an unusual problem. The other issue we had is the location. It started out having it in the Gateway was the perfect place to start it because people were able to see it, not miss it, but it started to grow. And as you can see from the top photo, we started to have really long lines of people waiting for Lifeline and Social Security. And so since the Gateway is an entrance to the library, it started to create issues for people trying to get into the library. And so we attempted to direct the lines and move the crowds, but it did get overwhelming at times. Since then, we've been able to move the program into the meeting room wing, and that seems to have helped with this problem.
I just want to point out our upgraded tablecloth with our logo and sign. So that was provided by a grant of $3,000 that we got, which was very helpful to just provide us some extra supplies for the outreach workers to use, paper and all that type of thing that they might go through. In the last 16 months, in the very first 16 months of the outreach project functioning, we did have the outreach workers use one of our stat sheets from the library, just that we use at the desk to keep track of interactions, and ask them to just keep a tally. And then we input all that data. And so over the first 16 months, there was an average of 19 interactions per event. So this was starting July 2021 and going through the first 16 months through October of 2022. And we had 128 events during that time, and a total of almost 2,500 interactions. So these are just some numbers, but we also had, of course, some qualitative things that were very great for library staff, for our partners, and also for the patrons who were being served. So I can say personally, just being able to be involved in watching the outreach staff at work was wonderful. I learned a lot from just seeing how they approached the work they were doing, the people they were supporting. Our security guards mentioned that they saw people who went and got help from the outreach project. Maybe they see fewer behavior issues. So maybe someone who was constantly falling asleep at the library would get some help from the outreach project and they'd see fewer behavior incidents happening. Our colleagues told us we love being able to, refer people to the outreach project, to have somebody who can help them on things that, that are beyond our scope of what we can do.
And I will say for myself that working with the community advocates on the outreach project, it's had a profound effect on me. Specifically watching Rob and Kurt work with people who are frustrated, angry, upset, sad. Those sorts of interactions used to really upset me, and they would have a physical and emotional response with me. And I learned from watching them how to better interact with people and to be more comfortable with someone who might be struggling that day. I think it went way beyond just de-escalation techniques. It was really being able to connect with people on a human level. They also shared some really valuable mental health training with me that helped to improve my customer service skills. And I think overall, it's helped me handle difficult situations more effectively.
We also were able to invite them to do, our deputy director invited them to do in-service training for all staff in 2022. And so that was really nice to hear from the outreach workers and get some assistance and training for all staff. And that's something we'd like to do more of in the future. When we met with Beth Waller, who was brought in by the state library to assess libraries across the state and how they were working with patrons and meeting their psychosocial needs or addressing psychosocial needs, we asked her, we've been doing this outreach project now for a while, and we really feel like we're getting more from our partners than they are getting from us. Do you think we're taking advantage of them? Do you think we're, this is an unfair kind of partnership? We're not paying them. They're here on a consistent basis. And she said, well, don't worry about that. The fact that they're coming in is a good sign that they're getting, something from working with you. And so our missions align with these organizations. I mean, when they come to the library, they are meeting their mission. They're accomplishing their mission to serve these at-risk patrons. So I did ask Rob and Kurt, what is it that keeps bringing you back? Why do you like coming to do outreach? And they said, well, our work oftentimes is street outreach. So we're actually out on the streets in camps for people who are living in tents. And, we love coming here where people gather during the day and we don't have to track them down. We don't have to be out in the cold or the hot weather. I mean, it's a nice, safe, quiet place that they like to come and spend a few hours every week. So they are, getting access to the patrons that they need to work with to achieve their job duties and roles. And we're providing an important space for them to do that. And then finally, we wanted to talk about the impact on patrons and some of the people they've helped. So Bershante is agreed to be interviewed to share with the conference with attendees his experience with the outreach project. And something I wanted to share before I start the video here is that I first encountered Bershante probably a year ago. And I was sitting at the outreach table and talking with Kurt about how we could help people. And he overheard us talking and he said, oh my gosh, you guys really actually care about us. He couldn't believe it, that we were talking about how to help him and help people. So he has been coming back to the outreach project on a regular basis and getting all types of assistance that he can from them. So I'll go ahead and play the video. The sound quality isn't great because we were at the outreach project. There was a lot of background noise when I interviewed him.
I'm 31 years old, and for the past 12 years, I've been homeless. I lost my daughter in 2017 to leukemia, and you know, I fell backward on life, and I didn't really feel like there was much going for me. And then, you know, I just lost myself, and I felt like I couldn't move forward with things. I then heard about the outreach program, and since then I've required not just a phone, not just, you know, people loving me for me being me, crazy, me being me, but I got a birth certificate, a social security card, ID, and I will soon be able to get housing, all because coming to outreach.
So this is just one story of the many people who have been helped by the outreach project. We've also heard other stories. For example, one person came to the outreach project and said he had just gotten an eviction notice, and the workers were able to find some resources in the community to help him stay in his home, so he didn't end up ending up homeless. We have had Kurt come in and pick people up to transport them to get haircuts and showers, to take them for a Thanksgiving dinner. They do keep a supply they bring in lunches, free lunches, from another organization and hand those out. They also bring in socks to hand out and clothing. And so on a few occasions, we've had someone have an accident in the library. I mentioned that, you know, we've worked with people who are experiencing like incontinence, and we've been able to get a pair of pants for them so they can change before they leave the library. And we've had situations where someone experienced a medical incident and left the library unconscious, and was able to talk to them and get contact information for family members. They were able to contact family members and let them know that their loved one was in the hospital. We've had situations that staff have encountered during the days when outreach isn't happening. And for example, like a mom and a young child who came in every day, all day. And we wanted to make sure that they had the awareness of any resources that they might be able to use because they were experiencing homelessness. And we talked to the outreach staff about it and just made sure that they were on somebody's radar, just so we knew that they were getting the support they needed.
I'm 31.
Just a few items for future plans. Marianne, are we okay on time?
We've got about 2 minutes.
Okay, perfect. So we mentioned that they've already done some in-service training for staff. We would love to invite them to do more of that. I think that would be appropriate to pay them for their time in that situation where we're inviting them in to come do training. We are in touch with other organizations who are interested in providing outreach services. Broadlawns wants to do a telehealth program, so that's a big kind of project that we need support from them to do, but that's something that has been discussed. I mentioned the Lifeline program and how popular that was. I would love to see the library staff develop some sort of homegrown program to do Lifeline or affordable connectivity programs and hook people up with laptops or phones. I think both Alicia and I are hoping that our library does go forward with hiring a full-time social worker in the future. We found that they've been really, really helpful for us. And then a suggestion from Beth Waller was that at some point we have an intern come and evaluate the program in a more formal way. So that could be another avenue to explore.
Okay, well,
get
and we are at the top of our end, and I see this is an interesting thing to end with because I know it's easy for so many of our librarians to say, oh yeah, but you're a big library in a big city. I'm a tiny library, one person in my tiny town. But you mentioned some things earlier that I think some of even our small libraries could do, like reviewing a behavior policy, finding out what community resources exist, looking at opportunities for outreach and partnerships, and that staff training, which is something that could be done as a group of county librarians. I think there are lots of ways to do this. Angela and I were chatting, my colleague, and we said we probably want to do another session with all of you because we're not going to have time to get to questions. And I know I posted in the chat that Dr. Waller is doing a webinar coming up next month, very soon. And I posted that in the chat. I will do that again. I recommend you watch that. And I'm going to recommend that we do a part 2 of this because you have an abundance of information to share.
Anyone in any of these counties, reach out and check out the Rolling Hills Coalition. You may be able to find a street outreach worker from CISS who can help you.
Wonderful.
And please reach out to us as well. We are happy to provide any of our materials to you, logos, etc., that you can just adapt for your own use.
Yeah, I'm going to us over just by 1 minute, because there was one question that I think was a really extra good one.
Sure.
How can you get this information, these resources to people that maybe cannot get to the library? Especially in some of our rural communities, transportation is often a problem. Do you have any ideas on that?
I think that is one of the goals of the Rolling Hills Coalition. They've seen so many people streaming into the city to get assistance who are experiencing homelessness. So they're out doing assistance in counties around Polk County to try and provide assistance on the ground with various things. So I'm not sure. I'll have to brainstorm some more things that the library could do.
If you want to put that slide back up that has your contact information. I'm sorry we didn't have time to get to questions and answers, but just so much good information. And Alicia and Elizabeth, if you're willing to do a follow-up webinar, a part 2, we would love to have you back.